What is Blink Twice really about? Frida opens the movie doom scrolling before she gets on the plane. What if I told you the movie starts brainwashing you the exact same way it brainwashes her? Hi gorgeous, my name is Sabrina and welcome to my channel. Blink Twice was released in 2024 and it sent the internet ablaze with its vulgar jokes and devastating plot twists that many connected to real life. And after rewatching it, I realized that many people missed out on what Blink Twice is really about because of the initial shock. The film is speaking to digital brainwashing and conditioning, and it's also speaking to the perfect victim. But first, let's recap this disturbing paradise. Blink Twice follows Frida, a bubbly waitress that deals with constant microaggressions from work from being too friendly. She suddenly becomes enthralled with a tech billionaire named Slater King at his annual gala. The two seemingly hit it off and she decides to join him and his friends on his private island. While she's there, the days start to blend together due to excessive partying and tossing back unknown substances. Frida starts noticing that time is passing and no one seems to remember anything, which oddly never raises any suspicions. What started as a much needed vacation turns into a horrifying fight for survival as Frida uncovers the island's hosts have been doing awful things to her and the women there. She learns they've been keeping it from them and brainwashing them into believing nothing is wrong. Keep in mind the brainwashing because it explains everything. Digital brainwashing and conditioning. At the beginning of the movie, a lizard appears and what many people didn't realize is we're already in Frida's trauma. This opening shot is what she last saw as she was tackled the first time she was on the island. The lizard symbolizes an early peak of her memory loss and how it's beginning to come back to her over time, hence why she makes a nail set with that same lizard and posts it online. With that in mind, I noticed that after Frida posted her nails online, she began doom scrolling. And this is very intentional because this is not only the first initiative of when the movie decides to brainwash Frida, but it also decides to brainwash you. Women are particularly vulnerable. People who have lived through violence doom scroll out of fear, says Dr. Malika, who is also director of the Harvard program in refugee trauma at Massachusetts General Hospital. Women are hit harder by doom scrolling because most of violent media is about hurting women and children, he says. Frida is unknowingly a victim of sexual assault and abuse, which is why she finds comfort in doom scrolling. Frida also has a anxious nature about her that she flicks through videos very quickly until she ultimately lands on her abuser Slater, which in turn feels like a trigger that is disguised as interest as the source that I just mentioned. This is conditioning and brainwashing. The opening sequence is providing commentary about how as a society, we were never meant to see and to experience as much as we do on social media. Frida literally cycles through influencers to street corner brain rot to a truck falling over on the highway. This acts as an early desensitizing to you and her from the real dangers in the world. That's why the movie takes such a sharp turn because it knows what you're expecting and decides to not only switch directions but doubles down on it. When Frida stops scrolling, she lands on a video of Slater apologizing for a scandal that the movie neglects to tell us, but it emphasizes that it was very bad. Frida becomes immediately enthralled by this and she decides to further look into Slater. To me, this represented that we were never meant to know so much about one another and we were definitely never meant to find out so much information about each other's background the way that Frida is doing Slater. And I think a lot of people don't realize that what Frida is doing is not necessarily healthy because now she's creating a parasocial relationship between her and Slater. And, you know, essentially social media is a market. So it's constantly trying to sell you things. It's trying to sell you new insecurities. It's trying to make you feel bad for not accomplishing things that other people your age are. It's trying to convince you to buy things in your house that you don't need. And all of this is essentially just conditioning so that you can fall in line and don't question the things that you're seeing. We see this in the next scene when publications like Page Six says, "The king is back." This is blood money. This is to confuse the masses and to brainwash and condition you into forgetting this horrific person's actions. This is why the movie makes the intentional decision to not tell you what Slater has done prior to the island because it understands that the world does not care about what abusers does. All that the masses are looking for is a reason to like you again, in this particular case to like Slater again. And I have worked in PR for a pretty long time, so trust me when I say this, many publications actually go out their way to rehabilitate abusive men's images because they know that you already trust them. And with that, you'll take their word that this person is remorseful, doing all the heavy lifting just because they've been paid off or simply because they know that the person alone is not strong enough to be able to gain you guys' trust. This reminds me of UFC fighter Conor McGregor. He was found liable for the damages worth more than $200K for sexually assaulting Nikita Hand in a Dublin hotel in 2018. One of the damages presented about the case was that Nikita Hand had to have her tampon surgically removed the night of her assault. McGregor suggested it was an athletic consensual sex. But don't worry, guys. Conor McGregor's overcoming a surgery. And can you believe he's unbreakable? So he'll be back fighting in no time. This is incredibly heartfelt. Thank you so much, US Today, for this useless news. Also, keep in mind that this is just one brainwashing tactic. Another that I was able to pick up on is how Black women are used as a means to empathize and humanize abusers. It's strategic. It's meant to soften your heart. It's essentially the mammification without the caricature. From slavery through the Jim Crow era, the mammy image served the political, social, and economic interests of mainstream white America. You're probably like, Sabrina, what does a mammy have to do with this situation? Everything. During slavery, the mammy caricature was posited as proof that Black people, in this case Black women, were contented, even happy at being enslaved. Her wide grin, hearty laughter, and loyal servitude were offered as evidence of the supposed humanity of the institution of slavery. Slater says to the interviewer he bought an island, as if that's something everyone can achieve. He follows up with, after everything, sometimes you just gotta stop and smell the flowers. He continues with no phones, no work, they grow everything, he wears the same clothes, he has chickens. And the interviewer just says, it sounds like you're a changed man. How? Mind you, he didn't say anything condemning his actions. He didn't say that they were deplorable and he plans to do better or how he plans to do better. In fact, he just essentially tells her in so many words that his money got longer and he just moved to another area to be able to do the bad things that he's been doing to begin with. This reminds me of Jonathan Majors, an actor found guilty on 2 out of the 4 charges in a domestic violence criminal case in New York. Majors' interview with Sherry Shepherd bringing her to tears because he portrayed his character in a movie oh so beautifully. Oh, and she did in fact bring up that he went through a lot, but no worries. He has good people standing in his corner to support him. There's a clear agenda in weaponizing Black women's likeliness while also causing harm to them. The conversation between Slater and the Black interviewer that he has and Jonathan Majors and Sherry Shepherd are very similar in how they rehabilitate these men's images in real time. It's touch on everything but what happened. It's when you do discuss it, don't be so harsh. In fact, in the next scene, the interviewer asks Slater, does he expect everyone to forgive and forget? Slater responds, he doesn't expect anything from anyone and it's not the reality we live in. This translates to Slater basically saying they will. Because Slater is a billionaire and billionaires are not our friends. And it's not every day that any of us can just up and buy our own private island and to start our own civilizations and to be able to hide away when things get rough. I also interpreted this scene as the masses being too parasocial. I've seen stans and fans online arguing about who fave is richer, who fave has the most expensive jewelry. Meanwhile, it's blood diamonds and gold. I've seen everyday people making fun of celebs who fly economy and not private planes. Meanwhile, private planes are killing the earth. Like, is that not scary to you? You got bills knocking on the door. You got student loans coming through the window. But you got enough time to sit on the internet and to focus on a celebrity who wouldn't sit up there, piss or spit on you if you were on fire today or tomorrow. To really emphasize this point, when Frida hears a knock on the door, the scene zooms out to her on the toilet once she finally comes out of doom scrolling. Her roommate Jess asks her for the rent money and she makes up an excuse as to why she can't give it to her. Frida can't even afford her rent. The opening scene stole yours and Frida's time and made up a whole scenario about Slater being a man of redemption. That's where we are in society and many people do not realize it. When Slater, Frida, and their friends arrive to the island, Stacy, Slater's assistant, collects everyone's phones. Now, why would they need to do that? But he immediately says to Jess and Frida, you don't have to do anything you don't want. Meanwhile, Slater and his group aren't just taking the phones to keep the girls from exposing their nefarious behaviors to come, but they're also making them unplug so it's all unsuspecting. We rely so much on our phones that all the rotting makes it nearly impossible for us to react appropriately in a timely manner to the things that should frighten us. The girls all willingly hand over their phones due to this. This is heavily referenced throughout the movie as Frida asks frantically, what is the time and day? And please let this be advice to carry with you. If you go to a fun place that requires an NDA, do not go inside. Any place that you are outnumbered in gender, do not go inside. Anything that looks small but feels wrong, do not go inside. This is how trafficking manifests. That is how easily you can be swept up into something that you don't want to be involved in. Vic, Slater's left and right hand man, foreshadows this as he takes the first picture of everyone and says, let's say, making memories. This was the second time that we actually get a glimpse of Frida's memory without realizing it. This is the second time that she has been here, but this is the first time that we are reliving this moment with her. The movie is setting you up to not remember these things or to not notice these things as Frida can't. As Frida gains more consciousness, so do you. This could also represent an early sign of abuse that many folks didn't realize. Frida is in an abusive relationship with Slater. She's been on the island twice now. Statistically speaking, many domestic violence victims return to their abusers at least 7 times before they leave. Slater even says later on in the movie, when Frida thought that he was going to kill her, that he would never kill her because she's his best friend. The movie is telling you that Frida is brainwashed, that having her memory wiped is the equivalent of what it feels like to be in a domestic violence relationship. The abuser strips his victims of remembering their bad events through gaslighting, physical abuse, love bombing, etc. It's almost like it further demonstrates this by throwing you into the heat of this and essentially making you feel as powerless as she did. When Frida and Jess settle into their rooms, an old non-English speaking woman appears. She says Red Robin to Frida, which you later find out was her way of trying to inform Frida that she's been here before. Now, do you often find yourself questioning rich people and then ultimately chalking it up to them just having money? Jess asks Frida if she finds it weird that they, Slater and friends, have clothes for them, and Frida says, nah, it's just rich people stuff. The movie delivers yet again another sign of brainwashing and conditioning. This is to isolate you and to normalize Slater's behavior early on so that you don't question it as the movie progresses. And you don't. As the viewer, we casually watch them change every single day that they're there in different white attire, and to throw you off their scent, they also make the men dress in white as well. This feels like a direct result of being chronically online and constantly viewing unrealistic lifestyles that brandish wealth as a realistic way to live. When Frida and Slater take a walk away from everyone, he once again says he has a garden and chickens. Because remember, he's a changed guy. He's playing up this role for Frida and weaponizing the words of the black woman who interviewed him because it grants him immunity. He uses this as a way to soften the blow about her asking questions about himself. He explains that he and his friends still do drugs, just intentional now, and they still have fun, but differently. In this same conversation, Frida said she would pay to forget. And Slater says, maybe forgetting is a gift. This is the whole theme of the movie. Slater is trying to convince you that forgetting things is actually a good thing, and that's how you're able to move on, by being blissfully ignorant. Ironically, that same night, Frida spills wine on her dress at the dinner table. And much later into the night, she and Jess are lying in the same bed laughing until she realizes the stain is gone. Jess is fast asleep and Frida panics, but she decides not to tell her. This is the first sign of danger, but this is also the first non-subtle nod to the audience that something isn't right. So what ends up happening? We end up moving on like Slater tells us to, because remember, forgetting is a gift. He actually honors his words to Frida, and he actually gifts her and us a night that we will never know what happened. Also, if you're currently enjoying the video, please don't forget to hit that like button. The perfect victim. When Frida was doom scrolling, she saw that Slater was caught up in a scandal for an abuse of power and regrettable behavior as a party boy, and she watched him give his apology statement on Instagram? Now, many people read this as Frida being entranced by Slater. However, I, on the other hand, saw this as Frida being more entranced by Slater's power and him being the representation of being taken seriously. At the beginning of the movie, I immediately recognized that Frida was listening to James Brown's The Boss. The lyrics state, "Paid the cost to be the boss. I paid the cost to be the boss." Now, keep this in mind. Walk with me now. In the next scene, Frida asks Jess where did she sneak off to at 3 a.m. Jess struggles to answer, and Frida tells her she isn't a human iPhone charger, to stop giving away her power and to have self-respect. It's harsh, it's brutal even, and it is a bit justified considering Frida says that Jess's ex is trash, but at the same time, you should never speak to someone that you love, or at least your best friend for that matter, in that manner, especially if you're trying to convey something or convey your worry to her about wasting her time on someone who doesn't deserve it. This is one of the first instances where we get a glimpse of Frida's struggle with control. Many sexual abuse survivors have trouble with the dynamics of power and can sometimes hurt the people they love if they lack balance. In fact, Frida immediately says she's sorry and I love you to Jess. And Jess replies she's scared of being alone, to which Frida says she isn't alone because she has her. This is learned behavior. Now, while I don't fully fault Frida for speaking to Jess in this manner, I do think it's not okay, but you can tell that her dynamic with Slater has seeped into her other relationships, especially with Jess, because seemingly Slater, being as charismatic as he is, he knows what to say and how to say it, and he knows how to control the narrative. But what many people like Slater and Frida don't understand, who are stuck in this cycle of abuse, that apologies can only take you so far, especially without actions. Otherwise, it's just words. When Frida and Jess sneak off to join Slater's gala, Frida asks Jess if she thinks Slater remembers her. Sweetly, Jess says, "Who could ever forget you?" This is another foreshadow of words because both are true. Slater remembers her and Sickly as his favorite girl. In this same scene, Frida trips when she talks about Slater to Jess, and then she trips again when she finally sees him. This time her hand is bloody as she lies on the floor accidentally smearing it. I truly feel like this represents how the universe tried to warn Frida more than once to stay away from Slater, so much so that it ended up injuring her just to get away from him. The second harsher fall, now being accompanied by blood, is now speaking back to the song, the James Brown song, about her paying the cost to be the boss. This was a deal with the devil type of ordeal as Slater appears in front of her immediately, despite initially being so far from her. Their hand holding pretty much cemented this to me because now that is a seal of their unionship, which means she is now going to sacrifice something just so that she could be close to Slater. With this in mind, Frida later told Slater on their walk she doesn't do therapy because it's self-indulgent BS. Because why would she pay someone to listen to her talk about how her mom tried to take her life in front of her? I recognize that this conversation between Frida and Slater is the reason why he likes her. Slater even agrees with her, which is why he doesn't do standardized talk therapy. He does trauma therapy that specializes in repressed memories. To me, this read as Frida and Slater are both broken people who are incredibly misinformed about therapy and what it does for you and what it can do for you, because they are so hyper fixated on just being angry and trying to suppress the things that hurt them, when in reality, by them doing that, ends up causing them to do things that they shouldn't and also hurt the people that they love and care about around them. I believe that Frida is very angry about her mother because she never brings it up again in the movie, but you could tell that from that additional information, she is fighting hard to not be like her and to take advantage of every single opportunity presented to her so that she doesn't feel like she has to take her own life for whatever reason the movie never tells us, but she never wants to be at that breaking point where she feels like she's defeated. I believe this is why Frida puts on a brave face when Vic tries to embarrass her for spilling wine on herself at the dinner table with the group. He asks her what's her story, and she says she's trying to figure it out. Vic replies, "Let me know when you do." And surprisingly, Slater intervenes and embarrasses Vic by saying he's got a degree in not knowing what to do. This was the first insight that I read as Frida not being highly sought after nor highly desired by the men on this island. And I believe that this is why Slater is also drawn to her, because his friend group is not fond of the type of woman that Frida is, because she is very unconventional looking. When Frida meets Rich, Slater's therapist, she says to him, "Blink twice if I'm in danger," and he does. But Slater cuts him off before she can see the second one. The two meet on the island and Slater introduces them again, and Frida says they've already met. I process these interactions as Rich seeing so many women come and go on the island that he's incapable of remembering and keeping up with how many of them he has already met. But then I went a bit deeper and I realized that we're speaking from the perfect victim. And I also processed this as Rich not seeing Frida as desirable enough to be on the island and desirable enough to be with Slater. If you look at the lineup of women, none of them are dark skinned, and this is intentional. Frida sticks out like a sore thumb, and that's why Vic thought that he could take a dig at her at the table, because she's not socially acceptable as the others. If you notice in the movie, none of the other women are berated in this way. Like, while yes, they all endure, sexual trauma and sexual assault, they still kind of treat them with a level of decency that Frida is not afforded. Rich also makes a surprised but somewhat disgusted face, and he says, "Well, that's amazing." And his face after the conversation really sold it that he doesn't like her being here without stating the obvious. To further prove this point, after Vic gets his face bashed in and he's overhearing Slater tell Frida that she's been here before, he also tells her that she bit Vic's finger off, hence why he's so hostile against her. What happens next is very shocking when Vic decides to call Frida an ugly B word. And this is very loaded. Don't get me wrong, because even Slater told him to shut up and told her to not mind him whatsoever. But this is intentional. Vic does not like Frida, obviously because she bit his pinky off, but also because he doesn't think that she deserves to be here. He personally doesn't find her attractive. And now we're starting to head into desirability politics about how people will mistreat and abuse people that they don't find attractive, and they will punish them because of it. This really reinforces the point that she is not the perfect victim, especially racially, because she's black, she's dark-skinned, and she also has unconventional looks of having a gap and having high cheekbones and just features that are not seen as exotic as the other women. Society doesn't care about black women, especially when they are the victim and they are abused. And unfortunately, this reminds me of the Black Panther Party. They were a group that protected the black community and provided resources to those in need, and acted as a self-defense against any threats attempting to dismantle the progress that black people were exhibiting. However, many people don't know that some of the Black Panther Party leaders were actually wicked people. Most notably, Elbridge Cleaver was a former Minister of Information for the Black Panther Party. He's a self-confessed sexual predator that admitted to sexually assaulting black women as practice so he could be able to sexually assault white women as a way to get back to the white man. He believed that defiling the white man's women, white women, was satisfying because historically white men had used and abused black women sexually. And overall, he saw it as the ultimate revenge. This made my heart ache for Frida because black women are disposable to every race of men. Really let that sink in, because people won't care that Frida was sexually assaulted, because Cleaver was sexually assaulting black girls in the ghetto, and he got away with it for so long until he actually started sexually assaulting women that they felt were worthy and had value, which were white women. Which adds a darker level to the movie because Frida was sexually trafficked more than once. So that means that she was able to disappear and nobody was concerned with her disappearance. In fact, when Slater and Frida share a laugh, she says something bad is about to happen, and a faceless waiter comes over to pour her more champagne. Now, I know people immediately made the connection to Epstein and Diddy when they watched this movie, and that's perfectly fine because there's a lot of parallels there. But I also see those two as more bigger picture. So I want to take it back a bit further into history before these were public names. Before there was a Diddy and Epstein publicly, there was Jim Jones, a powerful cult leader who called his cult the People's Temple. His cult consisted over nearly 80% of African Americans, which confused the masses as to why black people would be isolated with this white man. There were also allegedly a lot of awful things that took place there. And the term "don't drink the Kool-Aid" spawned after he made a poisonous drink, taking away many black lives as the largest mass murder in recorded history of more than 900 men, women, and children, which became a heavy warning for those to not blindly follow charismatic people like Jim and to avoid mass groups. Frida being the only black person, let alone black woman here, narratively sticks out like a sore thumb, and that's why the characters make so many side comments about her being there. Notice how Frida's cup is always filled up on screen, and it immediately made me think of Jim Jones because she doesn't recognize that she's drinking poison. So you as a viewer keep saying, hey, stop drinking that, but she can't hear you. She can't process that. Again, talking earlier, doom scrolling and not being able to pick up on frightening social cues, she is incapable of reading the room that she is being poisoned actively. And while it may not have been poisonous to her life, but it was enough to keep her stuck into the cult without questioning their motives, and she continued to drink the Kool-Aid, which made her turn a blind eye. We get a full picture of this when Jess gets bitten by a snake. Immediately, Slater and friends panic. They aren't panicking because she was bitten, it's because it's an antidote, and if she becomes aware, then they all do. Jess immediately tells Frida that she's scared because every single day they've been here, everyone's high and no one's questioning anything, and all she wants right now is her phone. To me, this represented that Frida lost her way. She definitely lost herself in the pleasures of things that she has never been able to have access to, and now that she has it, she has now become corrupted and selfish. She tries to tell Jess that she needs sleep, And Jess is not having it because she says something is really wrong with this place. And Frida says, what's so wrong with this place? Meanwhile, all Frida can list off is how the bed sheets have a high thread count, they have endless champagne. She's talking about it's paradise, they can do whatever they want when they want. So while she's going on a whole tangent, Jess is looking at her completely broken because she no longer wants to be here. Jess even says, you ain't listening. And then Frida begins to beg her and says she's not invisible for the first time in her life, so she essentially needs this. Now, this is a callback to when Jess said that she's afraid of being alone. This is the flip side of now Frida letting her walls down and admitting that she feels invisible. And this really reinforces the point of her not feeling like she's desirable and that she's pretty enough, especially to be around these women who are highly sought after by the men. And this signifies that Frida has truly lost her power. And it's heartbreaking to see her break down to this extent, but at the same time, you also realize how much grace Jess has given her and that she continues to give her because she agrees to stay. Meanwhile, Frida completely said the most harsh things to her when it was her turn, when she was trying to have that vulnerable moment. I definitely feel like this speaks to Frida not being the perfect victim because she allowed her story to speak over Jess. And this is such a parallel moment because Frida doesn't believe Jess. But when Frida made the argument to Sarah that they couldn't call the police, she said it's because they won't be believed. It's really a harrowing detail that Blink Twice adds because it adds an even deeper and darker narrative to the story than it already is. But that's the unfortunate harsh truth that sometimes women don't believe other women. So while yes, the bigger picture is that these rich white men are not going to go to jail or get in trouble for this because they're more likely to be believed, as Sarah and Frida discussed, but at the same time, it also really makes you realize how sometimes certain women will be the downfall of other women. And as I said, Frida is not 100% the perfect victim. And it's because she didn't believe Jess, she didn't take her words seriously, and in return, Jess actually died in a horrific way, something that she foreshadowed earlier in the movie, which unfortunately Slater actually does do later on. This is unfortunately direct commentary on the harsh reality of not believing women because Jess slowly becomes irrelevant to the plot as many women who face abuse do. And I do want to mention another not perfect victim, which is Lucas, aka Wonder Boy, which is what Slater calls him. When Slater calls Lucas Wonder Boy, he insinuates that he'll rule the world someday. There's animosity here, which I believe is connected to his own trauma as he's a sexual abuse victim as well. We received this big reveal at the end of the movie, and while I don't believe Slater was physically partaking in sexually assaulting the women, I do believe he received sexual gratification through berating his victims, which is still very much sexual abuse. The night we find out that all the women have been sexually assaulted, Slater is hollering at Lucas. I made this conclusion that Slater had personal issues with Lucas because in the beginning of the movie, he's all up for Lucas. He literally loves him, and Lucas says that he wants to someday be the crypto Slater. So you kind of think that they have an amazing relationship with each other, but then when you see him hollering at him as all the women are being currently sexually assaulted, it makes you wonder why that intentional choice. Why did they focus on them before moving on to the women around the room? And I pretty much concluded that Slater yelling at him is because he's using him as a punching bag for his regret of not doing anything for when he was a victim. We know that Lucas is a victim of sexual assault because earlier that night, when the girls drank the antidote, Frida smells him and she says, "You smell nice." This confuses Frida greatly because she thought all of the men were in on it and only the women were wearing the perfume that was assigned to them in the bathrooms. So the fact that Lucas was wearing it, she didn't have enough time to conceptualize the situation, but she definitely picked up on it really quickly that, holy crap, he's also going through this same mental game as we are. What really drives this home is when Lucas and Slater are hiding out in his private quarters and Lucas asks him, what did he do? And Slater says nothing. Lucas lets out a breath of relief and Slater tells him, no, you did nothing. You didn't help anyone, not even the girls. Why is that? And Lucas couldn't even answer. To me, this speaks to both of them not being the perfect victims. As I stated, I do believe that Lucas was sexually assaulted in some capacity because he actually does start sporting bruises, unlike the men. And I feel like this becomes a sticky situation because not only was he a victim, but he also stood aside watching the other women be victims as well. It's truly a hard situation to navigate in his shoes and as the viewer. Slater is also angry for not doing anything to save him and his sister, who apparently is really messed up by what happened to them, and she refuses to forget it like he does. Now, honestly, you can only feel but so empathetic for Slater because you know that he orchestrated this whole trafficking ring. He's got souvenirs. He's quite literally like pretending to be this guy that he isn't. But I feel like this is what Blink Twice is really about, because while all that can be true because nuance is definitely necessary in almost every situation, he is also still a victim. So it kind of makes you feel hatred for him, for the fact that you feel sorry for him in a way, but then you also feel bad for not feeling bad for him in a way because he is also just a victim like everyone else. And you essentially start putting two and two together that Slater's doing all this because this is him literally reliving his trauma. He is now the one in power and he doesn't feel as powerless as he did as a victim. So now he weaponizes his power, especially against the women that are being sexually assaulted. He was a bystander in his own sexual assault. He was a bystander in his sister's sexual assault. And now he's a bystander watching all of these women, all of these victims be sexually assaulted because he wants to feel like he's not alone, because misery loves company. And I do just want to shed light on this, that, you know, being a sexual assault survivor, it's not always beautiful. There will be some ugly, ugly times, and sometimes people go completely off the rails like how Slater did or how he does. And it is common that some sexual abuse survivors will live out their trauma by traumatizing other people. So it is important to have this representation, even if it makes us feel uncomfortable. The displays of I'm sorry's from Slater at the end, many men, especially men in power, can't take accountability and the consequences that come with it. And sure, we can have a conversation about cancel culture and we can actually break it down. How far do we go before we actually forgive people? Can we forgive people? Is it possible to allow people to move on even if you can't forgive them? In conclusion, now y'all know I like to keep it real, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I do not like this movie. And I definitely do not like the ending of this movie because I feel like the type of messaging that it ends off on is not progressive. Frida keeping Slater drugged up just feels like she's continuing that cycle of abuse, like she's perpetuating that this type of violence is okay just simply because he's already expressed that violence. I just personally don't agree when feminism takes this dark turn that we need to be even with evil men. Like, don't get me wrong. It's death to all abusers every single day. I do not support them, and I definitely think that they deserve to suffer. But we need to think about the optics of how far we're willing to go with this type of violence. Why would you want to be evil like them? Why would you want to replicate the harm and abuse and oppression that they put out into the world just because you want to have that power to feel like you are now in control? So I honestly feel like there needs to be a genuine conversation among women about honing our own power and relinquishing the idea that we need to have power that is tainted by corruption. Like, I know that there is a lot of interpretations about, you know, Rich approaching the table where Frida and Slater are, and she sends him away, and then these men in suits, which I've seen theories online of people saying it could be the FBI, you know, taking him away. Now, I don't feel like, personally, from my interpretation, that Frida necessarily called the FBI, because that will also compromise her riches and her and Slater, considering how much of an involvement that Slater has. But what I can say is, I do think that maybe the power probably went to her head and she used that as a means to now boot him out of that wealthy circle. I feel like even with all of that in mind, Frida is still using blood money. Like, this is money literally built off the blood, sweat, and tears of people that Slater has abused, especially young women and girls that went to that island who died, like Jess and all the other girls, or who are now victims walking without any knowledge of what happened to them, like Frida. So in a way, she still is in the corruption, even if she now has that position of power to do the right thing. So for me, I definitely feel like because the movie is left open to interpretation and not in a good way, it definitely hurt the movie's ending for me. And for full transparency, because you guys know I always like to keep it real with y'all, real, raw, authentic, and genuine, I emotionally struggled to make this video. So while the movie itself wasn't detrimental to my mental health, I want to say it was just the subject material, the things that I had to research, and just all of my thoughts combined is what made me internalize my own sexual trauma. And I kind of just had to sit with those feelings. And I just want to like share this because my channel is partly about raising awareness for sexual assault, among other things. But that's one of the main reasons why I started this channel, to be able to share my story, hear other stories. And I always just want to keep it real and just let you guys know that I too struggle. You know, like even though I'm so far removed from my trauma, I've done all the necessary work, I still have bad days too. So I really just wanted to make a note to myself and to you guys that I did a really hard thing, and I'm proud of myself because you're now watching the video. And I just want you to know that you can also do really hard things. And even if it's centering trauma, you should never, and I mean never, allow temporary feelings to stop you from carrying out your mission. Also, I do not like unsolicited advice about my trauma. I've gotten that a few times in the past, of people just making assumptions about where I am mentally and the things I've done for myself. Trust, I'm already all taken care of. I've done my necessary work. I am personally not striving to be the perfect survivor. I just essentially choose to be the best version of myself each and every day. And I allow myself to go through the motions. So if I got a bad day, I got a good day, I got an amazing day, I'm gonna have those days. And I just want you guys to know that I love you and I'm proud of you, and to continue to do hard things. And if you guys want to have any further discussions about your own trauma, you want to ask me questions about mine, you want resources, just let me know and I'm here for you. Thank you for watching, gorgeous. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please subscribe for more. And if you want to continue watching more of my movie breakdowns, you can click the video on the screen. And if that's all, I'll see you in the next one. Bye, gorgeous.